Jiyu, fantastic. I just wrote a letter of recommendation for you yesterday. Jiyu is a junior in high school, and she wants to play in the National Youth Orchestra, the American National Youth Orchestra. And I used to play in the English National Youth Orchestra when I was little, 12 years old. I got into that orchestra. And they asked me, who is this person? How good is she? And I said, very good. And I gave you the highest recommendation in every category. Okay? So I don't need to hear more of your playing, because I know I've known you for 3 years. You're a great player. Jiyu sits in the front two stands of the youth orchestra, surrounded by college kids, the best college kids from New England Conservatory. And she's in high school. Right? So already she's outstanding in every possible category: attitude, perseverance, keenness, every normal category. They ask, in what percentile is she of, I don't know, humanity? I didn't know. 1%, 5%, 10%. It was very difficult, because it's very difficult to know what they mean, because there was a famous story of two old gentlemen sitting outside a pub in Vermont smoking their pipe, and one of them says to the other, "How's your wife?" There was a long pause while they watched the sun go down and puff, and then about 15 minutes later the other one says, "Compared to what?" Compared to what? Well, in most categories, compared to the dedication, the keenness, the seriousness of purpose, you're a superstar, right? Nothing could be improved on. However, in your capacity to express anger, not so much, right? Partly because you've been trained not to express anger, right? To control your emotions, right? And what Shostakovich is saying in this piece is, I'm angry! Right? I'm angry with Stalin. Stalin, he had just blamed his Pasternak, his dear friend, and threatened his. Shostakovich was so terrified of his life in Soviet Russia that at night he would put on his overcoat and have a suitcase packed, ready for the secret police to come to take him away. He didn't want the children to be woken. Right. Do you imagine how angry he was, how terrified he was? Now, before you came down to play, you were practicing, but you were practicing the cello, because this piece is difficult. You have to find and you were worried you might play a note out of tune. But actually, that wouldn't have mattered. You understand that? I heard this piece for the first time in London in 1956. It was written in 1955, and a cellist who nobody had ever heard of came to play, who turned out to be Rostropovich. And everybody in that room was terrified. I remember it. And what he brought was terror, fear, unbearable pressure, no escape. Right. And he could convey that more completely than anybody had ever heard play the cello. It was like that. And he looked strange. I mean, he didn't look like an elegant Italian cellist. And when he wasn't playing, when the orchestra was playing, he was like this. So if I said to you, practice anger, you wouldn't know what I was talking about, and your parents wouldn't approve. Right. But unless you're willing to give up control and being nice And you're always, I've known you for 3 years, you're always nice. You're polite, you're sweet, you're gentle. We've been on tour, he never raises your voice, right? Ever. Do you ever shout? Apparently not. Some people never stop shouting. But you are beautifully produced, and it's great. It's great what you've become. And I gave you the highest rating in every department, right? And I hope you get in. Because the National Youth Orchestra is the collection of the best musicians in America, right? Of that age. So you belong there. You're great. Question is, can we add something? Are you willing to add something? Yeah. All right? Okay. Now, if you take the da 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 da, it repeats those G's over again. Would you do that? Yeah. Wait. Yeah. Yeah. Do you notice she's now revealing her anger because she's Russian. Dina is Russian, and she knows what I was referring to because her family is still living there. And you know, things haven't improved that much in Russia. Do you realize that? I mean, after all these years, it hasn't improved much. And so what she just did was very different from what she did before, because before she was being a polite accompanist because you're a polite soloist. And I said, no, come on, we're going to do something else here, right? And we unleashed. But unless you unleash in the orchestra that ferment of passion, of intensity, of anger, of fury, of that sense of being absolutely driven to the edge, unable to go any further, how can the audience get it unless we give it to them, right? So it's not only the orchestra, it's the Russian people you have to speak for. Do you understand? Now it's starting to get a little bigger here, right? It's no longer you practicing and making sure that you're playing the right notes, right? Because actually, you know, we don't care, as long as you get close. Okay. I had a very clever teacher once who said to me, Ben, you'll never learn to play well until you learn to play badly. I thought, what? Well, the reason was because my father practiced with me, and he was a wonderful amateur musician, and every time I played a note out of tune, he would go like that, like that. And in fact, one day he said, you're going to read in the newspaper one day, boy kills father by playing F sharp 2 flat. Well, of course I got more nervous and I played more carefully. And this very clever teacher said, learn to play badly and then we can clean it up. Okay? So should we try here? She'll inspire you here. This is the Russian soul. There, right? And you can feel it. Everybody's shocked because he goes higher and higher. It's already high on the G for a cello to play, and then it gets higher, and it gets higher, and it gets higher. And instead of withdrawing, it says no, more. And you know, I think, have you heard Rostropovich play this? So why did you play like that? There's a film of Misha Maisky. Look at this. It's a film. Do you know that film, Misha Maisky? Have you seen it? Well, he has hair like this. And he's sitting there and he's in a shirt. Have you seen that? Unbelievable. And it's filmed very well, sometimes from behind. You see his head going like this. You think this man is demented. And he is, because this music makes us demented. Terror, terror, terror. Unrelenting. It's just, do the passage where is that? Which number is that? You know the way it goes into 3/2. Hang on. Here. Do from 25. Maybe you could do 27 to get into it. Because what's happening is the horn solo is playing, and the horn is like a wild enemy. It's stalking its prey. The horn is like Stalin, just stalking its prey, like a predatory animal. That's what the horn is doing, and you're reacting. And this cello is trying to struggle out of reach of the horn, trying to get escape, screaming like a hunted animal. Can you get that? Just do there, two bars again. Try and escape. There's the horn. You're approaching it, and everybody in this room is moved by your willingness to get out of your polite box and struggle. You're not there yet, and they know that. But that's what the journey is about. Are you willing to go on the journey? It's going to take a lot of effort, because the pressure from society, from school, from competition, from grading, from ranking, 1%, 5%, all of that is nonsense. If you're a hunted animal, you don't care what percentage it is. Do you understand? So, I would suggest, yes, go on practicing. Please be diligent. Be what the Germans call brav. The Germans have a word for it. Be brav. Mean, be good. Be orderly. Get your grades in. Get your papers in on time. Do you always get an A? Yeah, of course. It's almost impossible for you not to get an A. That's why every category that they asked on that sheet was something that you would score maximum. They didn't ask about anger. They didn't ask about vulnerability, the experience of terror. They didn't ask about that. So that's a new opening for you. Nobody's ever told you that that's an opportunity. Now, for somebody brought up as Dina was in that world, where she feels it on her pulses. Keats says no philosophical statement means anything unless you feel it on your pulses. That's Keats. Meaning, if you don't feel something in your body, in your hair, in your sweat, it doesn't mean anything. It's just something you can write an essay about and get a good grade to get into college. But that's not what life is about. Now, this woman, because of where she comes from, we've worked together 15 years or more, I don't know. What? More. We don't count. We don't count anymore. We don't count anymore. But she has it in her, it's a privilege to play with her. And your job as a cellist is to unlock the greatness of this woman. And if you ever play with orchestra, to unlock the greatness that is in the orchestra, so that the audience can hear Shostakovich's story. You got it? Everything else is meaningless and worthless. So all the clever things you do in your practice room and up there just before, they're all practicing. But nobody ever says, to play this piece, you should get in a really foul mood. Imagine somebody trod on your cello and broke it. What would you say?
Well, I'd be really mad.
I'd be really mad. Yes, really mad. But what would you say? Imagine a young kid. Your brother, of course, is older. You don't have a younger brother to ruin your life. Can you imagine? See, don't ever touch my cello again! Right? Can you imagine doing that? Naturally, and I didn't say that to annoy you. I didn't want to upset you. I just wanted to unlock something that was maybe nobody has ever asked or suggested. Because one of the excerpts you did, Beethoven, Fifth Symphony, the second, was it the second? Oh, Dvorak, cello concerto, A flat minor. Do you know that? Dvorak, slow movement.
Oh.
She didn't know she was going to be asked to play. That's life, when suddenly something, oh my God, I didn't practice it. Yeah, that's the note it begins on. Great, from there, upbeat. So Jiyu, what is this about? What is it saying? What does it tell you? It's one of the most beautiful phrases ever composed. Dvorak, in the middle of the first movement, takes the theme, da ba da 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 ba da, which is one of the most defiant themes ever created. And he used it twice, da ya da da, and then in the New World Symphony, dam bum bum ba 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 da yum ba da da, and then he uses it here to express what? Sorrow, something more specific than that. Something personal, grief. Deep grief. He lost somebody that he loved very, very, very deeply. And he never got over it. And so he poured it into that music. So see, can you express grief? Do you express grief ever? Have you? Yeah, you do. Have you ever had a terrible loss? But I'm very divided in waiting for your answer. Part of me says, I hope she hasn't. And the other part says, I hope she has. Yeah. Because if you haven't had that experience, my teacher, Concerto, said, you cannot express great music until your heart has been broken. It's that simple. You can't get there unless you've had you can mimic it, but you can't actually get there until you've had that experience. So I was doing Mahler Ninth in Venezuela, and the first horn came to me just before the performance. He said, "I've got great news." I said, "What happened?" He said, "My fiancée just left me." And he poured his heart and soul into that performance. So when you play a theme like that, you have to call on some deep experience of sorrow, of loss, of the despair that you can't have back what you love so much. Right? So would you try it one more time and see if you can get in touch with that, some part of you that has felt that? And if you haven't had any experience like that, I would say jolly good luck, because, great, happy life, but you've been protected. Imagine what the people in Ukraine are feeling every day, or in Gaza, or in Moscow. And just the sorrow, the loss, the death, the tragedy. Dvorak had lost his country. He was in America, and he was deeply, deeply, deeply homesick for his home in Bohemia. Can you find something? One of the reasons we take you on tour, and you've been on 3 now, right? Or 2 and plus 1 coming up. We've been to South Africa, we've been to Europe, and now we're going to Mexico. The reason we do that is not to amuse you and give you because that's tourism. We're giving you experiences. We were in Dvorak's hall where he conducted and played the New World Symphony. And do you remember the English horn played in the very place where he conducted it? We played, and somebody wrote, Kalish wrote me this morning, he's off at Stanford, and he wrote so beautiful about what that experience was like, and what a profound effect that made. I got the letter this morning. Incredible. And then I say, yes, it's worth it. All that effort of taking 120 kids across the earth to have experiences that they can't have at home, right? So that they can draw on those experiences and those sounds and so on. So dig deep one more time. And every note, and that should take all your emotional effort, and you can't go on. And then you go, okay, I can do another one. And they're parallel, those two. And the third one tears your heart out. And the flute is accompanying you and telling you another story of the consoling. Music is so amazing, isn't it? Should we try that? Do the 2 bars. And I'm going to imagine that you're soloist, this is the orchestra, and I'm the conductor, right? And we've got to move every person in this room so they feel. Once I was listening to this, my teacher was playing, and he often didn't practice. He was a great cellist, but sometimes he didn't practice. And one day he was playing this piece, and I was in the audience, and I said, "Oh, the old man is playing like a pig tonight." I mean, he was just all over the place. And then I looked at the lady sitting next to me, and tears were streaming down her face. I was 15. And I said, oh, I see. It isn't about how well he's playing. It's how deep the people feel. Right. So don't practice so much. Okay. something to you. You're a little impervious. You're impervious. I'm making a lot of effort and you're saying, leave me alone. I can manage perfectly well without you. Right? Right? Don't manage alone, ever. Right? Don't manage alone. Use everybody and everything to help you be all you can be. All right? So we do it again, one more time. It was beautiful, actually beautiful. Can you look at me? Finish. Right. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. That was something. That's on the way, on the journey, right? And you know, I know that everybody in this room was moved by that, everybody. And they all probably were saying, that was great. How much more there is that Jiyu could give, and how much they wish that you'll be open to that path. So I have an invitation for you. Play safe or go dangerous. If you play safe, I can promise you a position at Harvard or Yale or anywhere like that you want to go, and you'll have a comfortable life, probably 2 cars in the garage, nice fence around the house, all of that. You know what I mean. The other path is dangerous, risky, vulnerable. But the reward is, look at these faces. You can touch human beings, not by working in a bank and improving their wealth, but by touching their hearts. Right? And those of us who've chosen that path, like Dina, get rewards that the bank managers never get. The letter that Kailash wrote me this morning, no bank manager gets a letter like that. No. Thank you. Thank you for being available to that. You know, you've always been that way. And he's not only great himself and a wonderful violist, he brought 30 people to a concert. That's how it translates. That's how it works. It's not the publicist who does that. It's the people who are touched by it who do that. Right? You get it? So this is a big overview. You've got 1 more year of this before you go out into the world. I don't know what you're going to decide, and I don't, at this moment, it doesn't matter. But I'm glad you came this morning. And it isn't about the bow and the left hand, it's about the heart. Everything is about the heart. Okay? So thank you for achieving what you've achieved so that I could write number 1 on every single category, but there was something very important for us all missing, which is what we had tonight, or this morning. Okay, thank you.